sport has classifications for a reason, to create fairness across society. And that's what we were losing. Women were losing their fairness in sport.
Sharron, welcome to Times Radio. Can I get your reaction, first of all, to the decision by FINA today?
I'm really pleased. It's been a very difficult last 4 years. A tremendous amount of aggression has come from one side, when all I've ever been asking, and people, other athletes like myself, have been asking for, is fair sport for females based on the science that we have and that we know. And I'm very proud of FINA that they've done that today.
You said that 4 years ago, along with 60 other Olympic medalists, you wrote to the IOC and asked for clarification on this issue. Your main request was to do the science first before any decision was made. Are you satisfied that's been done?
Yes, I mean, I think we could have avoided so much if they'd done that in the first place. You know, it was never a sensible move to only listen to trans lobby groups. They didn't ask female athletes. They didn't ask coaches. 22,000 swimming coaches petitioned FINA and said, please protect the female classification. You cannot level the playing field if a male has been through male puberty. And they listened, and which, I'm hoping now that other governing bodies will do the same.
Yeah, it does set a precedent, doesn't it? People who are critical of the decision say it doesn't conform to the sort of morals of the IOC, that it makes the sport not inclusive by separating out athletes who identify differently to the sex they were born with.
Yeah, except for we don't see that happening with trans men. So those that are born biologically female and transition to being male still carry on and compete in the female category. So, the president is there for people to do that. This is about being inclusive, but first and foremost, putting fairness as a priority. So there is a way that we can be inclusive. And the president of FINA has said, we're going to have an open classification. We're going to spend 6 months now with a working group working out how we will actually put that into practice. And he does want everyone to be involved in sport. And as so do I. We love sport and we want to share our sport. And club swimming and has always been open to absolutely everybody, but elite level sport is very much affected by your biology, and the difference of 10 to 30% at Olympic level is just absolutely vast. And even if you could, you could remove 50% of that, you're still giving away 6, 7, 10% in some instances. That wouldn't even put you in the competition, let alone in the same race.
Will having an open category, as FINA suggests, and as you say, they will be looking at over the next 6 months, will that be having an open category for anyone who doesn't identify as a man or a woman be problematic? So you could, potentially have transgender men against transgender women in that category, couldn't you?
Yeah, except for FINA have said that transgender men, so biological females, if they're on testosterone and they have what's called a TUE, so that's an exemption, would be able to compete in the men's classification. So it would potentially just be transgender women who want to compete against females, but we know it's not fair from the science, so therefore they're creating a classification for them especially.
The detail from FINA says that open category will be competitions for swimmers whose gender identity is different than their birth sex. So you could be looking at non-binary people in that category as well. It could become a melee for anyone who doesn't identify with the sex they were born with. How do you try and regulate that, or don't you? Is that the point of it?
Yeah, except for, again, that doesn't usually happen. So non-binary athletes that competed at last year's Olympic Games in Tokyo, who were biologically female, still chose to compete in the women's category. So they will still choose to compete in the women's category if they're going to come up against anybody who is male, because they will not win against anyone that's male. And that's the whole point of what we've been talking about. That's the reason why we have those classifications. Sport is exclusionary by nature. We have races for 10-year-olds and we don't have 15-year-olds in them. We have numerous classifications in the Paralympics so that we try to create a level playing field for people with different disabilities. And we have weight categories and things like boxing, so we don't have a heavyweight competing against the bantamweight. So sport has classifications for a reason, to create fairness across society. And that's what we were losing. Women were losing their fairness in sport.
Are there enough swimmers who don't identify with the sex they were born with to make an open category competitive, if we take an example like the Olympic Games?
It's a really good question, and I honestly don't know the answer to that. And I guess that's why they want to have this open, working group to try and work out, with consultations with everybody, how they can move forward and create that classification if that's what the trans community would like to happen. So I think we're probably going to go back to the drawing board. But as far as I'm concerned right now, I'm very happy here tonight that female athletes, that's 50% of this world, who were not consulted for the last 4 years on their own futures really in sport, have been listened to, along with the doctors and along with some of the human rights lawyers who've been standing up for sex discrimination, and we have a protected classification, and I am really pleased.
I think I'd just be concerned whether that open category was making a bit of a mockery of the sport, really, with only a few truly competitive swimmers in it, and also people qualifying for it that would never normally qualify for something like the Olympics. So prized, as you know, so much work goes into it, and they wouldn't normally qualify for it, and unless, for example, they identified as non-binary.
Yeah, non-binary, as you say, or transgender women. I honestly don't know. It's such a difficult question to answer, because this is maybe, would be, could be, and we're just going to have to wait and see. And they are going to have to iron out some of these points, and see what the likes of someone like Leah Thomas would like to do. I think you're right. It doesn't really make it potentially very fair if we have a classification where only half a dozen people around the world take part. So we are going to have to look into that. But right now, I'm quite happy to celebrate in the fact that I feel that female sport has at long last been given an equal playing field to compete on. And that's really important for half this world.
What happens in the meantime to an athlete like Leah Thomas, who we've mentioned, who would be unable to compete, who would be unable to compete at the highest level as it stands? She might say that she's being penalised for being transgender while this open category is in discussion.
But Leah had an unfair advantage. Leah, when she was competing as a man, and that was only just over 18 months ago, was 800th in the world. And then Leah transitioned and became number 1 at the NC2As, beating 3 American Olympians. Now, that's not equal. That's not moving and transitioning and remaining equal. That's having a massive advantage. And I'm sorry, but I will always continue to insist that that's not fair.
Yeah, but she's been penalised by the authorities, isn't it? It's not her fault either that she feels that she has been born with the wrong sex. She doesn't identify with the sex that she's born with. So I think someone might come back to you and say, well, it's not her fault either.
But it's also not the fault of the 7 other people in the race.
Yeah. Okay. Finally, just taking a step back from this, in terms of sport and the culture of sport and the competitiveness of sport, does FINA's decision today represent what you think might be the beginning of lots of discussions and lots of definition, which some sports have been very concerned about doing for lots of different reasons? Do you think this is breaking ground, that this will be a landmark for many other sports to then start to look at their own organisations and their own competition rules?
Absolutely. I would give anybody advice right now, if you're in one of those sports like cycling that is not prepared to look at the science and is putting inclusion in front of fairness for female athletes, then, put pressure on your association to do the right thing. Sport is all about fair competition. That's the whole point of it. That's the cornerstone of it. We have WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency, which spends millions of pounds every year trying to find people who will take drugs to get the tiniest advantage. And that's what we were ignoring with women. We were saying you have to compete with people having a large advantage against you. Whereas men have fair sport, women weren't entitled to have fair sport. And that's not fair. So, I'm suggesting to all those athletes out there now that hopefully this will give you a little bit more power to your elbow to go out there and demand that you get equality and you get equal rights in sport, the same as your male counterparts. And I defend Leah's choice 100%. I don't want anyone to be unhappy. And I think gender dysphoria must be incredibly difficult to live with, and I have the greatest sympathy with anybody. However, I will always come back to the fact that females deserve fair sport the same as males, and there is no reason why we can't find better ways, and I'm very glad that FINA has done that today.